Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tired Boys podcast, bringing you the world of Formula One motorsport into your ear holes. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. We've got a lot to talk about today. We've got some quick hitters as always. The Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at Imola was this past weekend, so we've got some F3, F2, and F1 there. Upcoming Monaco Grand Prix. But I'm excited to get into it. Justin, how are you doing this week?
Yeah, feeling really good. Excited to get into this conversation. I thought the 2024 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix was a really fun one. So I think there'll be a lot to talk about there. Before we get into all that, let's roll the intro here. Just this
You're not
chat
2D.
Yeah. So it was fun to reach out and touch you, my friend.
Circuit of the Americas is where it's a track that was created for racing.
So the race is a flat fee, and then it's the bake off afterwards where things get really kooky.
Okay, that's where all the weirdness comes in. Mercedes definitely started planning for their new car.
If Red Bull came out and was just like, Adrian Newey designed our car.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah, did he really?
No way.
All right, perfect. Let's start where we always do. Aaron, let's take him through our quick hitters here.
Yeah, so as we had talked about last episode, we were talking about the Indy 500 qualifying and practices and all these sessions that are going to be going on across the IndyCar weekend. So I, of course, followed that a good bit and was taking a look at the process for qualifying. So just very interesting how they kind of do it, especially with it being a larger grid than normal. They had their positions 1 through 13 through 30 being set on the first day. Everyone's out for qualifying, only the top 12 moving on to the next set of qualifying. So at 13 through 30 sets all the grid positions there. Then you have the top 12 qualifying that you get P7 through 12 lined up with the top 6 going to the fast 6. But also in the Indy 500, they have last chance qualifying. And so there are 3 additional slots that get added onto the grid. So there's 4 drivers that make it into this last 4 P31 through 34 go into the last chance qualifying, and 1 person gets left out there. And then the fast 6 to top the grid and finalize those positions. So a very busy week, really, because that went from Saturday, or busy weekend. That was Saturday, Sunday, for really all of that, a number of different sessions after getting some good practice in all week. But just to kind of look at the grid and everything, it's a lot of the kind of typical contenders that ended up making it to the top. Scott McLaughlin, Will Power, Joseph Newgarden up there towards the top of the grid in the top 3 positions. We saw Catherine Legg, who has had a number of IndyCar races, a female driver in the grid who she made it to the last chance qualifying and out qualified Indy 500 winner Marcus Ericsson, and then Graham Rahal as well, who were the other 2 who made it through the last chance qualifying. Ericsson had a pretty rough initial qualifying, it seemed like a lot of the drivers were just having trouble getting the tires into the right window for the qualifying sessions, and were falling off their initial first lap pace pretty significantly. So the 3 of them make it in the last chance qualifying for P31, 32, and 33 on the grid. But I just found it pretty interesting and kind of surprising that Marcus Ericsson, who has won the Indy 500, ends up being in that position in general, but able to make it on the grid. And in the Indy 500, anything can happen. There's 11 rows on the grid, 3 cars across, so there's plenty of ability to move up without really like too much. You're not set too far back, I guess, even starting in P like 30, 31, 32, 33. You're still pretty tight with the back of the grid. But Roman Grosjean starting P26. So it'll be interesting to see how he does as someone who's not a oval track racer. And then Callum Ilott, who we talked about racing as the substitute for Arrow McLaren, over Teo Porcher, who's going to be driving for them for the rest of the season, is starting P15. So he actually had a really, really solid qualifying, just hopping right back into the IndyCar and getting into it for the Indy 500.
Gotcha. Now, a couple of questions here. So you talked about a couple of drivers finding it difficult to get the tires into the right window. Now, do they qualify on the regular tires or the alternates?
I think it's on the regular tires. Everyone's on the same tire compound. At least there's no option or it doesn't seem like anyone chooses different compounds and everything based on trying to warm them up in the right window and everything. Most likely just because there's a pretty significant difference in in the pace of the tires. Typically in IndyCar, it's pretty significant, like a hard tire to a soft tire in F1. So I imagine that most of them would, whatever the option was going to be the quickest they have. But it was, just like a lot of cars kind of sliding around, having some moments around the turns, and not from really hitting dirty track or anything, but just some speed wobbles coming off of those banked corners and everything. And that, of course, significantly affects the 3-lap average that they do, or 4-lap average, I think they do, for the qualifying pace. So it's your average speed across the four laps that you do. And the top drivers on the grid were going 230. So Scott McLaughlin in P1 had an average speed of 233.492 miles per hour, which is crazy, just insane.
Okay. So that was going to be my next question, is how do they actually decide the grid position? Do they have 3 shootout laps or whatever it is? But you're saying over the course of 4 hot laps, their average top speed is factored in, and then whoever, and then they use that to determine the grid order.
Yeah, and so for their qualifying, they also do 1 car at a time on the grid. Right. So it's like a 3-4 hour session where the drivers are just lining up and taking their turn. If they don't like their qualifying, they can come back to the pits. The engineers work on the car, refuel, do whatever tweaks to the aero, wing adjustments, things like that. And then they can get back in line to go out. So across the day, just a ton of opportunities, just a long time of qualifying. I watched a decent bit of it, and it was just ongoing, car after car. I left, I did some stuff, I came home, still just qualifying going on. But they take that top or that average speed of your 4 laps that you do. So you just come out, you do your little warm-up lap, and then just right into 4 hot laps, and then into pits.
Very cool.
Kind of going through. So very, very exciting. I mean, with the speeds they're going at and everything, it's pretty cool to see. And of course, with a lot of these drivers who are kind of subbing in or driving as just extra drivers on the grid. Helio Castro Nieves, who I believe is a 3-time Indy 500 winner, if I remember correctly, is starting in P20. so he'll be on the grid as just an additional driver. Catherine Legg, like I said, another driver who has raced in IndyCar previously, multiple Indy 500 appearances and all, coming back in. But there's a number of those drivers out there that are additional for the weekend, or for the, I
Gotcha.
guess, month of IndyCar, or of
Well,
Indy
yeah,
500.
because I was going to ask, now after qualifying, are there more practice sessions for the race?
Yeah, so they actually had the next practice session was I believe it was no, it was yesterday, was the 8th practice session of the weekend, and then coming up this weekend on it will be on Sunday. We have the Indy 500, so there'll be
Very cool.
plenty. There will be another practice session on Friday. Think there Saturday, it looks like, is all just like publicity and like interviews and driver meetings and things like that. So a couple things still before the weekend and before the Indy 500, but we're kind of getting down and to the nitty gritty of the race.
That's really exciting. Looking forward to the Indy 500. We also had some, I guess that's some World Endurance Championship going on. We had the 24 hours of the Nürburgring as well.
So, and this was a sim iRacing 24-hour racing event. So
Okay, so not part of the WEC.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is sim racing through iRacing. They have some series that they have going on, but Max a couple weeks ago, I guess, realized when he was like talking with people about like the upcoming race that he had signed up with his team, Team Redline, to race in this 24-hour event with his two other drivers on the team. That also happened to coincide with the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix that I guess he didn't realize, or just like he was like, yeah, I'll sign up for this 24-hour event. So up taking pole position Saturday for the Grand Prix on Sunday, heads back to the hotel where his one of his people, assistants or whatever, had set up his sim racing setup and everything. Hops in and does a 2.5 hour stint on the team for the iRacing event. Goes ahead, goes to bed, gets up in the morning for the Grand Prix, does another 2-hour stint of the Nürburgring, and then heads on over to Imola for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix and start. And so just a pretty like funny, and just the guys on his team were joking about allowing Max to participate in his hobby of Formula One racing and everything, and like, oh yeah, we're a great team. We're allowing one of our drivers to go do like participate in his hobby on the side this weekend as well and all. But his team ends up taking P1. He extended their lead during his second stint and everything a little bit by 10-15 seconds or so.
Okay.
Before going in and racing on Sunday in his F1 car.
Dude, that's kind of crazy to me. Like, I wonder, man, you just
see
nothing shakes that guy. Like, my consideration would be, dude, you're going from like rubber on road to like video game and then right back to like rubber on the road. It's not even the same track. You know, it's not like you said like 24 hours of Imola and then Imola. It's like two different tracks. So like to keep those separate in your head is yeah, that in and of itself is impressive. The endurance is impressive. Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Well, and it's interesting to me because like I feel like in the majority of other sports or whatnot, there would probably be, from the team side and everything, particularly Red Bull, who is paying him tens of millions of euros to drive for them year to year, that if he like does this racing event or this iRacing event and everything, and then has a bad weekend, I mean, like that, I feel like is a pretty questionable thing from Red Bull's side to look at it and be like, yeah, like you messed up. Is that because you weren't focused on the weekend? Is that because you like forgot the turn order and everything because you were thinking about this other circuit? Like because of the feel of the car versus the set? Like there are a number of things I feel like a team could set like shut down someone for doing that. Like if an NBA team has a guy who's like, oh yeah, I just like go out to the park on weekends and play pickup basketball with my boys and everything on this blacktop cement is like whatever. They'd probably be like, hey man, how about it's the playoffs right now and you don't go mess around and potentially injure yourself playing basketball like on your neighborhood court or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like there's a lot of that kind of thing. I mean, we saw just injury to David Malukas with the Aaron McLaren IndyCar team taking him out of the seat. I feel like there's a lot of reasons that a team would not want to let someone do this. But Max is just kind of a different animal, I guess, when you he's just built different.
To a certain degree, I don't think anybody's like gonna incur significant injuries like sim racing. You actually probably have a higher chance of injury actual racing. So
100%.
That's like one of the key differences. But I do hear you on the like, yeah, I have a feeling not too many other drivers would be afforded that type of, maybe use the word like freedom, trust, whatever. But yeah, Max does seem to be capable of spinning all of those plates and whatever. If his performance doesn't drop at all, yeah, what can they say? But I do have a feeling there are some teams and some drivers that you're right would want to be prioritizing F1 Grand Prix as opposed to like video game events.
Yeah, and so that's more like, I definitely agree with the risk of injury and everything. I was more trying to like come up with a comparison because I feel like it's a little different than like say an NBA player just playing NBA 2K on their Xbox. Like there's actually, you are kind of racing to some extent compared to like just a controller versus dunking a basketball. It's like a lot more comparable of things. But yeah, just a pretty funny start to the weekend, I guess, for Max getting pole position. But leading into the race, of course, we had the last quick hitter was just that we had Sebastian Vettel there this weekend. He was it was awesome to see him around the circuit with the different drivers. Everyone, of course, loved Seb and was happy to see him there. But seeing him drive Ayrton Senna's McLaren around the circuit and everything was just really, really cool. I also just love the sound of those F1 cars. They sound beautiful. But having Seb, who is just such a beloved person, like be the guy to come and do that and drive his car, I was like, that's the best choice he could make, really for who to choose on that. And so a nice tribute leading into the weekend.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a I don't even know what the word was. I was gonna say like definitely a fun one, but like a tribute isn't necessarily fun.
Like
I guess
touching,
I would say like touching is a great word. Yeah, touching is a great word for it. And Seb wasn't the only one to do to do dedications like that. There were up and down the paddock a bunch of people, kind of giving their best wishes, to Ayrton, to the family, and all of this, and also to, I believe the gentleman's name is Ratzenberger.
Yeah.
So yeah, to both of the families as well. So to use your word, a few touching moments from an ex Formula One driver, which was great to see.
Yeah, and like I said, really, you couldn't pick a better former driver to have
Agreed.
come out and everything. I feel like Seb is just, especially towards the end of his drive in F1, was just loved by everyone and a joy to have around. So I'm sure everyone was happy to have him there for the weekend as well.
For sure.
So yeah, cool and touching tribute there. But we'll get into the full Emilia Romagna Grand Prix weekend here in just a moment. But if you're here with us right now, take a moment, like, subscribe, Spotify, YouTube. We really appreciate that. But we're also targeting 100 subscribers before the end of the year. We're really looking to grow the channel and share our love of motorsport and F1 with everyone who's willing to join with us. So we're always happy to interact with anyone who's listening. Thank you all for anyone who's here listening with us now.
Yeah, thank you very much. We definitely appreciate your time to join us for the Tired Boys podcast. But yeah, back to the program.
Yeah, so getting into the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix weekend. So for Formula 3, I didn't really have too much to note. It was a relatively normal weekend going through and everything. I was just looking at kind of the grid there. I watched the feature in the sprint race, and there wasn't anything too crazy. It was just seemed like a pretty standard weekend overall. But the sprint race, I was curious because I had never actually looked into the format and how they set the grid for the sprint race versus the feature race. And so I found that they end up doing their qualifying and everything. And the top 12 drivers on the grid for the sprint race are reverse grid order. So 1 through 12, like pole position would be P12. So that way, with I think it's 26 drivers on the grid, it's not full reverse grid where if you finish P1 for the feature race, you're starting in P26. That would be a pretty tough way to do it. But yeah, like just a pretty normal weekend. The drivers who did Fornaroli is the leader in Formula 3 right now. He had a solid weekend in the feature race. But yeah, not too much of note there. Looking at Formula
for F3, the one thing that I think is kind of interesting was Goethe, the gentleman who finished in P2. So he starts P6. He starts P6 in the race, makes it all the way up to P2, like snatching him enough points to then like now he is kind of in the fight with the other guys up there, where previously he was kind of like hanging a little adrift. So yes, I would argue like nothing too crazy happens in the race, but I think for Goethe specifically, I think this race was pretty big for his kind of title fight, and kind of brings him into contention, and he can make something of his season. So I thought that was pretty cool for P2.
Yeah. Well, and for the winner of the feature race as well, Megatunif, I think is how you would say it. Similarly, he jumped up with that finish up to P6 right behind you said Goethe?
Goethe, yeah.
Goethe. So he's right there in P6 behind Goethe in P5. And so that race win jumped him up significantly there, only 3 points back. So yeah, there's definitely some movement. But I feel like I unfortunately don't know as much of the F3 drivers this year. I haven't had any particular person that I'm really like watching.
Sure. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, so but some big movement for a couple of drivers on the grid there to jump up. looking at the F2 race, the sprint race was pretty wild from the get go. We've seen this a couple times now in F2 this season, where in the race start we're seeing some really kind of massive incidents and everything. We ended up with 6 DNFs, which I believe the majority of those were from that initial start and everything of the sprint race. Just really kind of mayhem coming out. But going through the race, Ollie Behrman was able to kind of work his way up through the grid, who had qualified P1, or no, he had qualified P2 in the qualifying, so he was starting down in P11. But just has a really nice race, works his way up to P5 for the sprint. But we end up with some charging drivers through the grid in the sprint race. Franco Colapinto being the main one, who makes a really nice charge at the end to take P1 and be the first Argentinian driver to finish on the podium in F2, and of course first Argentinian to win in Formula 2. We had Paul Aaron and Zane Maloney in P2 and P3. Zane Maloney, of course, who's been at the top of the driver standings kind of from the get-go from the first weekend. But lost my train of thought. But Paul Aaron, who finished P2 in the sprint race, is P2 in the championship as well. Kind of trying to bring that fight to Zane Maloney. So a nice start for the weekend for both of them with the sprint race.
Yeah, for sure. And then the Ollie Behrman P5, forever increasing his stocks. And then the, follows up the impressive performance in the sprint race, has a decent start in the feature race there as well. But that's where it starts to go off the rails for a couple of drivers in the feature race.
Yeah, and so really just tough first pit stop for Ollie. He stalls after getting his tires and everything changed, and then the team gets his car restarted. But as he's like going to leave, another car is coming into the pits, so he has to hold up again, and the car stalls out a second time. So he dropped from P1 at that point all the way down into the 20s by the time he comes out of the pits, and that was kind of the end of the race for him, unfortunately, with this, especially with the feature race really having no significant on-track issues from that point on, bringing out a safety car or anything that might have bunched up the grid. We did, however, have just some weird moments in the pits that we'll talk about in a minute. But to wrap up the feature race for Formula 2, Isaac Hadjar ends up taking the lead, holding strong throughout. One of the Red Bull Junior drivers taking P1. Gabriel Bortoleto takes P2, and Joshua Dirksen finishes P3, who is the first Paraguayan to finish on the podium in F2. So a pretty cool weekend for multiple of these South American drivers to end up on the podium and everything for the first time representing their country, which is just a neat thing for the weekend. It's cool to see. Similarly, like we talked about last week with the female drivers who were getting wins in Formula 4, talking about F1 Academy, talking about IndyCar and Indy NXT. It's cool to see just the pool of talent in motorsports growing and getting these talents from all over the world, and being able to see those drivers just show off their skill sets and go out and put great drives in.
Well, to be fair, I think that's one of the more interesting parts about motorsport in general. And I think it's like a thread that runs through the like sports slash activities that I enjoy either doing myself or viewing is like the truly international element of them, where it is one activity or a sport bringing so many walks of life together. I actually truly believe that that's one of the like draws for me as a fan, and like not only what it is for the competition, but for the drivers individually. It's cool for them to have that accolade, but often the iceberg that's underneath that little bit of storyline, though, is what does that say for the region? That means
Mhm.
that they, as a whole, have likely leveled up their just infrastructure as a whole. So that means like from the youth to the karting and then into, whatever national series that they have, like it shows a growth and it shows a capability for those regions to put forth you know, a world contender in that series, and I do find that very interesting to have regions that were not able to represent pushing through and persevering, and now you have these individuals that are standing on the podiums and having their flags waved and this and that, and I going back to my original point, I believe that is part of the beauty of it is individuals from all over the world can come to these events, win, have their flag hoisted, and have their country and their heritage and any of that like recognized. And I think that's very fun.
Yeah, and alongside with that, kind of a like to piggyback off that, just the not just the it showing the growth in the region or the country or whatnot with where these drivers are coming from, but I feel like it also encourages growth in that region as well. On top of that, it doesn't just signify that there's been growth, because now someone like Joshua Dirksen might encourage other young drivers. He might be that idol for young drivers. Wow, he grew up 10 minutes away from me, and look, he's up there in F2. He's driving. He's finishing on the podium. Like, I want to be just like him. And that passion for whatever sport, activity, gaming, anything, just encourages that growth, which is pretty cool overall.
I
So
definitely
yeah,
agree.
neat weekend for both Joshua Dirksen and then Franco Colapinto, the sprint race winner as well. But to kind of continue on the F2 and work our way into F1 here. We've got a new segment that we're going to try out. The name, we'll see if it sticks, but we're going to start it off with, hey, that's weird. And in the F2 feature race, we saw in the second set of pit stops, one of the drivers, Emery Cordial, comes into the pit stops. They're putting on the super soft tires, getting ready to send him out for the last 5 laps of the race. And as he's leaving his pit box, his rear right tire just flies off, not secured, hits a tire, as well as I think maybe glances off of the engineer of the car in front, who's there for the Red Bull Junior Jorge Marti's pit stop, who then sends out Jorge Marti with his back left tire not secured, spinning off in the pits as well. So 2 drivers losing their tires as they're trying to leave the pits. Of course, Marti's engineer getting hit, and then he's the same guy who doesn't get his wheel secured. So just a bizarre kind of scenario. And then we get into the F1 race, and Alex Albon comes into the pits early, trying the strategy that a number of the drivers did with going for a quick first stint, and leaves the pits for his long stint on the hard tires. and immediately realizes one of his tires is not secured properly. It's wobbly, a little loose, and has to loop around back into the pits, and just kind of kills his entire race weekend, unfortunately for Albon. But just a bizarre kind of back to back to back with these wheel issues at Imola.
Yeah, and it'd be one thing if it was, different types of incidents across the races, but yeah, having it be wheels not secured causing issues. Dude, man, and if you watch the Cordeal moment, like it's crazy because you can feel you can feel the domino effect like playing out where the team members for Marty are not aware. Like they're all focused on what they're doing. They didn't see this other guy like get tagged and totally interrupt that back left, mounting process. Like he was way behind compared to everybody else. And then yeah, like they just sent the car out anyway. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, most of the time everything goes fine, it all works well. We had talked before we went live about like it's so weird. Usually there's like checks and balances and safety lights and red lights that go green to tell you, when things are proper and we can move forward. And here it just like that all went out the window. I mean, this wheel flies like, I mean, because he gets like he puts wheel spin onto it and it literally like flies off.
Yeah,
Dude, it's
and I
crazy.
mean, and kind of like scary at the same time. Like the wheel is probably gets up going 50, 60 miles per hour from
Yeah.
just them leaving the pit box and accelerating that quickly. So fortunately, the engineer only had a glancing hit from it after it hit the tire that he had there ready to go initially. But yeah,
Mhm.
just a domino effect, like you said, with the getting hit, slowing down his process, not getting his tire fully on and secured before they're dropping the car and sending out the driver and everything. But yeah, just a bizarre kind of coincidence, I guess, between the two races, having some issues from the Williams side of the garage as well. So hey, that was weird this past weekend with the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. But looking at the race, the one thing I wanted to kind of go back to briefly was just the expectations that we kind of talked about leading into the race weekend and kind of how that ended up panning out. I know I kind of talked about Ferrari and McLaren going 1, 2, 3, 4 with Max DNFing in Australia, circuit being similar. So had a feeling that we were going to see the Ferraris and the McLarens, and of course with the upgrades that we've talked about,
Mhm.
having good pace on the weekend, and really they did. There was a really nice stint in the middle that Ferrari had a lot of good pace, and was really challenging. Leclerc was challenging Lando for a while. The McLarens had great pace, of course, with Lando as well, and Piastri with some nice strategy decisions and just great qualifying from them. But so relatively accurate. Red Bull, we expected to be kind of back at race pace, which was for the most part correct with Max, but Sergio just had a tougher weekend trying to kind of make up from poor qualifying.
Mhm.
And then with the V carbs, we ended up seeing Yuki snag a point. So we were pretty close on with a number of those predictions or kind of expectations for the weekend.
Yeah, for the most part, I think Carlos Sainz would be um a little dismayed in that regard. Obviously, Leclerc getting the better of him in this race. He felt kind of adrift from, to my mind, what's like the top 4 or 5 from Imola. Which, fair enough. He's still up in the points. I think it doesn't spell a bad weekend for the driver. There's just a lot of heat at the top, and it seems like any given weekend we're gonna see, I'll say, like, moderate shifting around from the top 5 to 6, right? Depending on how the Mercedes pace is. Like at Imola, it wasn't really there. Like they were definitely the fourth fastest car, both of them.
Yeah.
They throughout all the sessions they were sticking relatively close to each other. But yeah, there's definitely some excitement there between Ferrari, Red Bull, and McLaren. I mean, even Piastri was like, he was comfortable. He looked really good in Imola. So yeah, not just for like Lando's pace, but as well for Piastri's pace. Yeah, I think pretty close to what we set as expectations. But yeah, I think Ferrari would be like miffed. They'd be like, come on.
Yeah, I think that would be, especially bringing in all these upgrades and everything. It's a big upgrade package. I think as they dial it in, like I said, there probably will be some improvements that they gain from this package that weren't seen this weekend, and depending circuit to circuit as well. But yeah, coming in with this big package, big expectations. I know Charles was on the radio at the end of the race, and just a bit, he was a bit bummed that he couldn't bring in the win for Ferrari at Imola, but with all the Tifosi there and everything. But getting on the podium is a solid weekend still. So a nice weekend overall. But before we run through all the teams and everything, let's hit our winners and losers for the weekend. So Justin, why don't you hit me with your winners for this week?
So my first winner here for the weekend is Nico Hulkenberg. All weekend, my man was on it. Q3 appearance for him is huge, but also like for Haas, like that's huge as well. And especially in comparison to his teammate, where I'm pretty sure K-Mag qualifies like 18, right?
Yep.
So it's really, really exciting to be that far ahead in the like team head to head. Like it must be wild the difference between the two going on, and Hulk is clearly showing it. I think his qualifying was really strong, and he's clearly the top driver for that team, and somebody that the more we see from him in this form, like, dude, the more Audi must just be rubbing their hands together like, come on baby, 2026, man, here we go. Because like, I don't know, I want to be a little bit reserved, but it seems like he is catching his tires in the right window, in the sense of like he's strung together a couple of these performances where one starts to believe it's like a little bit of form coming from him kind of thing, as opposed to like, oh well, maybe like the Haas car is like better on this track or whatever it is. Like, nah, he's clearly like doing really well.
Yeah,
So Hulkenberg's my first winner.
No, I'm 100% with you there. He had a great weekend. Just unfortunate with finishing position, but I think he did the best that he could with the car and everything. Making it into Q3, he gets the tow from Max actually on his best qualifying lap in Q2 to qualify into Q3. Kind of gives the favor back to Max in Q3 as well, giving him a tow on the straight, which helped out with his very marginal tight qualifying pole position. May not have gotten it without that extra speed. I think he had about 5 to 10 extra kilometers per hour that he was able to hit with the tow down the main straight and everything. So yeah, Hulkenberg, he's doing everything he can to put that car in a good spot, and he's looking like a really, really strong driver. So that's awesome. Definitely with you on that.
And then my second winner here for the weekend is McLaren, just overall. My note here, a performance over the whole weekend that shows they're really in a good position to bring the fight to the Red Bulls, not just flashes of brilliance, but a string of good form. And one thing that maybe goes like overlooked or underlooked or whatever is, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about the McLaren upgrade package that Lando got the full thing, Piastri got the half. Now now both cars are running it. They clearly are not only able to come up with, make, and bring these upgrade packages, but they're also able to understand them as well and like know what they're doing, how they're helping them, because they're not like, it hasn't taken them time to quote unquote learn about the upgrade package, which is something that we've heard from principals a bunch before where they're like, oh yeah, we just, it takes time and this and that. But McLaren really, it seems like every weekend, this one included, and this is why they're my second winner, is every weekend they're just hitting the ground running. They know what they've got. They know what their goals are. And it's really fun to see because I think both Lando and Piastri are just able to make the most of it. And they're killing it.
Yeah, well, and that is good to lead into my second winner of the weekend, which was Lando in particular. But agreed with McLaren as a whole, they've really shown this performance, and both drivers are driving not only at a high level, but they are driving at a very consistent level. Unfortunate for Oscar getting the penalty for impeding and everything, the 3-place grid drop, because he was right on Max for pole position potentially. Barely finishes behind him, but starts down in P5. So just a unfortunate mistake from him and the team to lose that P2 that could have potentially had two McLarens fighting at the top. But really for Lando, he's just continued with his great form. 3 weeks in a row now with a 1-2 with him and Max at the top two steps of the podium. And just a really great charge from him after the last pit stop, and as he got the tires into the right window and everything to chase after Max. He had, he was complaining about the tires, but McLaren, like you said, they have really figured out something with that tire degradation, because we've seen it now in multiple races where they're able to just maintain these solid windows where Max is talking and other teams, Valtteri, Max, a number of drivers talking about how they feel like they're ice skating out there with the tires having no grip towards the end, and Lando is taking a second a lap out of Max for the last few to bring it to a super close finish. If he had one more lap, probably would have had Max there at the end. So McLaren and Lando, they've really had a solid string of performance. Oscar, of course, included. He's just hasn't quite had that luck or just everything kind of work out the right way for him to have those finishes like Lando's had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for Piastri to, get a race win, I honestly think his Saturdays need to improve a little bit. He's often just a little bit behind who we traditionally think of as our top qualifiers. So interestingly, I don't think it's like his race pace that's the problem. I often find like a little bit lacking in qualifying in that regard. But I mean, he's got a lot of time. This guy he'll be winning races here soon enough. But here, who was your first winner for the weekend?
So my first winner was just Max. He had the
easy.
win with the 24-hour Nürburgring event on iRacing with him and his team, but then going on and especially just in particular on a weekend that the Red Bull was struggling more than they have in recent memory. We saw Max really complaining about the setup and things not really feeling quite right. He ends up even on his pit stop coming in, and I think it was like a 2.8 second pit stop, a little slower than normal, but partially because they were doing a wing adjustment as well on the front wing to help out with some of the balance and everything of the car, but really just was not super comfortable across the weekend in the car, and talked about it as the weekend was going on. So to end up getting the win in the race, getting pole position and everything, that's pretty huge. So those are my winners for the week with Max and Lando.
Solid, yeah. I think those are a couple of good picks, a couple of gimmies if you ask me. But we'll take them here. We'll take them.
I'll dig deeper next time.
No worries, no worries. Who are your losers here for the weekend?
Yeah, so my first loser was George Russell, which is not in terms of performance or anything, but I just feel like he kind of got slighted by the team a little bit, and I feel like he should be getting. Lewis is leaving at the end of the season. You would think that some of the priority or some of those decisions would start to lean more in George's favor, but we're out there seeing both Mercedes on the same strategy, essentially. Earlier pit stops, running the hard tires long in the race and everything. There's a significant space and everything between both George in, I believe, P6 to Lewis in P7, and then Sergio behind in P8, adrift 20-some seconds. And Mercedes decides, hey, let's play the team game. And George, yeah, that's a really long stint. It's about the same length as the stint that Lewis is on, but we don't know if your tires are going to make it to the end there, bud. I don't know about that. When I think Lewis's tires were about 5 laps newer. So, I don't know, George, let's bring you in, send you out, snag that extra lap point, even if it means you lose out in the driver's standings to Lewis and everything. You're ahead of him a little bit anyway. So let's just let Lewis get the extra points, and we'll take that extra team point. George clearly was not thrilled with the idea on the radio. He played the team game and everything, and it's it's tough. He's having a really solid year in a Mercedes car that's struggling clearly. He's leading Lewis. He was by a more significant margin. It's not a massive lead or anything like that, but to lose out on any points when it's the driver's standings and everything, that can be the difference at the end of the season. And so I really felt like George kind of got slighted a little bit by the Mercedes team and crew just to try and snag that one extra point for the constructors. I feel like that was the intention behind it the whole time, personally, in my opinion, and that they were really beating around the bush with George. Oh, George, we don't know if your tires are going to make it to the end. Why don't you just come on in, instead of being like, hey, we need every point that we need in the constructors. You are far enough ahead that you'll come out in front of Checo still. If Lewis pits right now, he'll come out behind Checo. We're trying to get the extra point. Boom. Just say it. Be straight up with your drivers. And I felt like they weren't. I feel like going, come on in, George. You're kind of setting him up to not be as trusting in the team and the pit wall and everything by being not straightforward. If you're just hey, we've got the gap, come in for the lap, we're going for the team, and that's what we need you to do, I think George would have been like, am I going to lose out to Lewis? Is he going to swap back? And they would be like, no, but we really need this point in the championship. And I think George would have gone ahead and done it, because I think George is a good teammate and a good driver for the team. He sees he's
Mm-hmm.
not competing for the championship, and we go, okay, like I'll make that concession this time. But I felt that was really bizarre.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, especially with them being so close. Like, man, close in performance. I understand the position that they were on in track, the position they were in on track. From the team's perspective, I think that's a really tough tough thing to do diplomatically. I agree. There was likely the more m- the more honest you are, I think the better the easier it is to understand in that regard. But yeah, props to George for not really like making a big deal out of it and just saying like, yeah, this is the plan, this is what we're gonna do. So yeah, props to him in that regard.
Yeah, and I just think overall, like it's a pretty straightforward thing to understand. Hey, if Lewis pits, he's behind Checo, and we lose points. If you pit, you're still ahead of Checo. Like that, we same team points, but we
Right.
get a shot at the fastest lap. Like it's really
Right.
not like a complicated thing, and it was very obvious watching the broadcast that like what the goal of and intention of that was.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just kind of funky. But my other loser for the weekend was it's unfortunately kind of been a recurring theme of late to some extent, but the Williams team having a really tough weekend. They've just been having a tough year with the chassis issues and everything that they've had from damage and everything. Logan Sargent just struggling to put together solid weekends and consistency and everything. He's had some decent weekends that have registered on the radar, but overall just struggling. And of course, Alex Albon and the wheel nut issue really just eliminated him from any contention in the race.
Mm-hmm.
With there not ending up being any safety cars, virtual safety cars, or anything during. A lot of the drivers were hoping for that as a way to kind of jump up. We saw a number of drivers going really long stints on the hard tires from the get go to hopefully have something happen, get a cheap pit stop later on in the race. And it just didn't happen there. So with Alex Albon coming back out, trying to, he never gets the opportunity to unlap himself from a safety car or anything, and just ends up kind of drifting off and then retiring the car at the end of the day. Just not worth it to keep him out there. So just a rough weekend for the Williams squad, and that is my second loser of the weekend.
Yeah, I think similarly to mine, Alonso here, pit lane start for the race after really tough qualifying, and then I'm pretty sure it was like them changing parts or something, or like
Yeah, so he had crashed in FP3.
right.
And then so the parts changes and everything. One was like very hesitant on the qualifying, but then changing parts to start for the pit lane.
Which just makes it like really tough. You know, he was quoted as saying like, "Yeah, we just completed the race. It was like the most boring thing ever." Aston Martin states that it was basically a test session, an extended test session for the car, and it's like, man, that is just the worst thing that you want to hear from a team and from drivers. So yeah, that's like my big loser for the weekend is Alonso. That's just tough to hear from that guy.
And it does make sense to a decent extent, especially with like Imola is not the easiest circuit to pass on. It really there was not a lot of shifting around. I mean, the top five was almost identical as grid starting order because we didn't end up with any issues. The only change being Oscar Piastri getting the undercut on Carlos Sainz and making up that one position. But otherwise, it was not a lot of movement across the grid, really, especially in the top half of it. So yeah, like at that point with Alonso, it's kind of like, yeah, unless something crazy happens, we're just trying to get data.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because honestly, like when Alonso is having good weekends, he's one of my favorite drivers to watch.
So fun.
Yeah, like to use Alex Jakes' term, he's a wily operator, that one, and he is very entertaining to watch. But like if Bro's P20 like doing a practice session for an hour and a half, it's like okay,
I could have
I'll
watched
find another
practice.
driver to like, which is unfortunate. But
Yeah,
hopefully not too much more of that, because basically, like we're saying, we like to see Fernando Alonso performing well, and on weekends when he's not, it's just kind of disappointing for him and the team that he's on, Aston Martin.
definitely. And then what was your other loser for this week?
It was Sergio Perez. I think he sometimes, track dependent, begins to look like the JV squad to Max's, clearly the varsity squad. It's tough seeing him being 8, 9 tenths off the pace in Q2 from what would be Max's Q3 lap. Like, I want to drink the potion that Formula One puts in the punch bowl that both the cars are the same. If both the cars are the same and it's just like a setup difference, tell me why. Tell me why is Sergio Perez like always not doing so hot? And it's like and it must be frustrating as like a dedicated Red Bull fan where you're like, bro, we could just be slurping up literally every single point. We could
Mhm.
be point rich, but
I mean, yeah, like looking at the constructor standings and everything, Red Bull is 56 points up on Ferrari. It's one bad weekend, a double DNF away from Ferrari potentially being 5, 6, 7 points behind. I mean, it's not like the gap that we had last year, and yeah, Checo is just not. He's struggling to get the feel in the car, and like especially the weekends that Max is struggling with the car, Checo similarly struggles. Max just is able to. I mean, it really shows the quality of driver he is to be able to not be comfortable with the car and the setup and everything and still put the car on pole position, go on, win the race, and while your teammate who is probably dealing with a lot of similar issues is just kind of adrift off in no man's land.
mm-hmm.
It's weird. And to be like, we're starting to get to that point of the season where it's like I didn't have any reason in particular that I felt like Checo should be replaced or anything like that. But looking at the fact that he was outqualified by both Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki has been putting in some banger performances all season long, really. It
Consistent to say the
starts,
least. Yep.
yeah, consistent and like, I mean, solid for the VCARB team, like above I think expectations at this point in the season. Um, that does kind of leave it up in the air of Yuki and his position and potentially moving up. I would definitely lean his direction over Danny Ricks right now as the potential option, but not that Checo, like I said, they're winning the championship, but again, like Helmut Marko had talked about, yeah, as long as he's P2 in the championship, like, hey, no harm, no foul, Checo. Guess what? He's not P2 in the championship after this weekend anymore.
Right.
Charles Leclerc overtook him, and so now I think that does leave some extra questions up in the air for that driver slot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, and unfortunately, like it's tough because what does he end the race? Sergio ends P8 this weekend.
I think so. Yeah, P8.
I mean, it's so tough, like, being that guy. Like, for literally any other driver, any other team, P8, slurping up points. Yes, solid weekend, good job. But, like, when you are this guy's teammate, dude, literally anything short of perfection is just like, obviously the spotlight's on this guy. So that's really tough.
Well,
But just to,
P1 and P8 is 29 points total on the weekend for the Red Bull squad.
Mm-hmm.
P2, P4 for McLaren is 30.
Mm-hmm.
P3, P5 for Ferrari is 25.
Mm-hmm.
Like, McLaren made up a point in the constructors. I don't think that they're going to be like able to catch up to Red Bull necessarily without something like really some significantly like just dreadful races for Red Bull. But
Sure.
I mean, finishing that low for Checo, that does have an impact on these positions and everything. It keeps other teams in the game, and I'm sure Red Bull would be very excited to just dust their hands off Constructors Championship 1 with 6 races to go or whatever it was like last year. But that's not the kind of trajectory that things are going.
Dude, yeah, that's what I'm seeing. And I just have to believe there are drivers with more upside than Sergio right now on the grid. And if you ask me with no data, I would say his clock is ticking.
I mean, I think that's a very reasonable potential option. I mean, this is round 7 of 24 across the year. It's still super early. Like I said, one double DNF and like a P1, P2 from Ferrari, and they're right in the fight. And obviously, that would be a catastrophic weekend for Red Bull, and most likely wouldn't happen with the consistency and everything that they've shown. But it happens. Like weirder things have happened, and it by no means is out of reach. We're seeing the potential for some actual title contention sneaking up with. I mean, we have 17 races to go. That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of points.
Yeah, a lot of points to go still. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on Checo's position leading up towards the mid-season break and all. I feel like that's when we'll end up getting a few more confirmed drivers and everything. But depending how things are going, some of those seats might drag out a bit more before being confirmed. And I feel for Checo a bit because I feel like he was in a better zone to start this season out where he was feeling like it was almost a blame. Max was just smoking everyone, including him, because then it wasn't in his head of like, oh, I'm in contention, and then falling back and back and back like last year where I felt like there was, once Max kind of turned the tables, his mental just deteriorated a little bit. Where this year, I feel like he was able to stay consistent because there was no, like, almost, I don't know if he didn't even have as big of an expectation of contending with Max, but it seemed like he was more even keeled and all to start. But watching it kind of slip away here and there on these weekends, that's just not ideal for him. So we'll
if you're thinking about like his position and then how it contributes to Red Bull, it's not optimal.
Yeah, and for himself as well. I mean, if he loses the Red Bull seat, does he have a seat in F1 anymore? Like,
oh man,
probably
just one call to Lawrence Stroll and just be like, yo.
I mean, there's other seats available, but what if he loses that seat pretty late in the season? Seats have locked up, and Liam Lawson gets brought in, slotted into the VCARB team. Like, there's a world where if Checo doesn't perform, even if he finishes, say, P3 in the driver's standings, that he could end up without a seat, which is wild.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting to think about. And nor do I think he would be one of the top slots in contention for like a return to Formula One, like in 2026 kind of thing. I think if he loses his seat, I think he becomes, I think his stocks go way down.
Yeah, I think the likelihood of that at this point in his career is not massive, and I also don't see a lot of other teams that might be chomping at the bit to necessarily sign him in. I don't think he gets swapped down to the V carb team, and someone gets swapped out. I think Red Bull would release him, and then it's battling for a lot of contentious seats right now. So, yeah, a lot to see. But just to kind of run through just other notes for the race. Of course, we talked about Ferrari and their pretty good pace. Carlos Sainz, like you said, a little bit of drift, but Charles Leclerc had a really solid weekend. He was pushing. It seemed like with Imola for both him and Lando, they kind of realized that once you're in that slipstream and in the dirty air behind the car in front, the tires just really overheat pretty quickly. Lando said that about trying to get past Max. Leclerc, I think, similarly had that same kind of experience trying to get past Lando. But some really good pace for him in front of the Tifosi.
Yeah, and it's always fun after the race to hear the them addressing their fans like in French, like in their home language. That's always fun. So that was kind of a Wait, oh, what did I say?
French.
Oh, fuck me, dude. Oh man.
So talking about Alpine, we've got Alpine. I didn't actually have much for. They just didn't have the pace this weekend with the two French drivers over there. You were just jumping the gun, ready to move on since we had talked about the Ferraris, but it was again sort of peculiar with the Alpine team as well. We saw Gasly getting pretty fired up in, I think it was FP3 that this weekend was supposed to be his priority weekend, and everyone got bunched up trying to do their last like hot laps and everything at the end of FP3 to prep for qualifying. And oh, sorry, Pierre, all these cars got bunched up and no one got a good lap in. And Pierre comes over the radio, no one except Esteban. It's like, Esteban got his lap. Why didn't you guys have me in the right spot to get my lap? What's going on? And so definitely some tension there. I think that is just kind of a continuation from what we saw last season. I feel like Pierre feels like he is being treated as like driver two. When both drivers are really on a pretty equivalent level, in my opinion, for performance across really the past couple seasons. It's been very back and forth and everything. So an interesting thing, which is kind of, I think, popped Gasly's name into potential option for some other teams. I heard his name being tossed around here and there as a potential driver option. I think for Williams was one who was having some meetings and talking with him. Williams also met with Valtteri this past week, so there's some still potential movement around the grid, of course. But yeah, Pierre just seems frustrated with the position that he's kind of in with the team.
Yeah, and with this scenario, it definitely feels like one where you want to look at the team angle more than the driver angle. There are a couple of drivers, they're race winners in that regard, so you got to feel like if the car was capable, they would be putting those performances in. So it must be frustrating for them, and it's got to be frustrating as fans of those drivers because you're constantly kind of being cast in a negative light when you've likely done the best that you can with the car that you've been given on any weekend. So that's got to be frustrating. And yeah, you could
Mhm.
definitely tell over the team radio this weekend that Gasly's maybe frustrations were allowed to boil a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, understandable, especially if they're saying, "Hey, we're going to prioritize a different driver week to week. We're going to swap it back and forth, take turns, whatever the situation is." To like to not even be into the qualifying and race weekend and already be feeling like, "Hey, this is just the same as last week when Esteban was priority."
Hmm.
That's got to be pretty tough. But the I my only other kind of thing of note, and you can let me know if you have anything else, but I did have to give a little shout out to Lance Stroll because he was able to on a weekend that that the team struggled and that Fernando in particular had a tough weekend. He picks up a couple points, kind of with probably the fifth fastest car, so fifth to sixth fastest car. Getting the P9 was probably the best that he could have done without any of these safety cars or incidents or anything that might shuffle things around. So yeah, just Lance put in a good race, and so I had to give him a shout out. Like he's had a tougher season so far, and so picking up a couple points is solid for Aston to maintain their position.
Yeah, definitely agree, especially on a weekend where Fernando, obviously struggling. Definitely good to recoup some of those, some lost points. So yeah, I would definitely agree with the Lance Stroll point, having a decent weekend. But yeah, nothing really, nothing really too crazy, nothing that I, am like dying to, stick down your ear hole. So if you would like to, we can move to the cool down lap here for the episode.
Sweet, sounds good. And for this week, we're going to be running through the flavor of the week. So Justin, why don't you lead us off here with your flavor of the week?
Oh man. So I'll give it to you really quick. My music and my food. I want to spend a little bit more time on my visual medium here. So the food for this week, we did a curry chicken where previously we would go like one, seasoning sauce route. We found a different brand sauce that was like a
Hmm.
little thinner, as opposed to like a more thick curry sauce, and boy, was it a good one. This is a curry chicken that I am very excited to go back to. So that was a good meal for the week. And then my music here, me and my mom were doing some yard work this week. So we were listening to some Jackson Brown on the radio. Nice breeze, nice music, spraying down some of the deck furniture. So that was really pleasant.
Nice. It's
And
awesome.
then my visual medium here for the week. Boy, oh boy. MSI 2024 for League of Legends finished up this past weekend. We had the lower bracket finals on Saturday and then the upper bracket Friday. Dude, it was so exciting. Spoiler alerts. So the lower bracket final was T1 versus BLG. That goes to all 5 games. So the like priority basically for the pick bans, it was all centered around the top lane mostly, where it was like, are you playing Kesante? Are we looking to counterpick with TF, Twisted Fate, or
Okay.
Vayne? Where
All
like
right.
Vayne top got played multiple times against Kesante, specifically Genji's top laner Keen played it
Okay.
immaculately. Like, bro, like actually like fun to watch competitive Vayne gameplay. Like, so that's a highlight in and of itself.
Nice.
So lower bracket finals, BLG versus T1, game 5, the whole time throughout the series, very top lane focus. Obviously, we have like the lane swap meta going on. Game 5, BLG is on blue side, so they'll be revealing their whole draft before T1 gets to counter pick. remember what I said, the whole thing was around Kesante. So Camille, melee bruiser, kind of carry top laner, is a really solid pick into the Kesante. You have really good trading early game, but then in the late game, Kesante cannot touch you. Like, you'll always have that side lane priority. BLG, they don't fuck around. They don't ban Kesante out. They just have been just slam Camille pick 5 on blue side, basically as a dare to Zeus on the other side, saying, go ahead, pick Kesante. Like, pick whoever you want. We don't care. And then Bin proceeds to throw T1 in the dumpster. I'm pretty sure his Camille that game goes like 7-0 or something. They had no response. It was wild. So, like, ridiculously just confident pick and ban from Bin specifically, and then BLG on top of it, and then for them to play out the team comp so well, dude. The TP flanks that Bin was able to get off in this lower bracket final were insane. Like, this guy was a demon for sure. All right, so that was the lower bracket finals. They beat T1. Now they're up against Gen G. Now this is a matchup. So BLG already got knocked down by Gen G. They've already lost to them in this tournament. They fought for their lives back. Now they're back in the upper bracket final. This one goes to 4 games, but this one now is an opportunity for Gen G's mid laner Chovy, for the first time ever, puts himself in an international grand final, but now he's actually in a position to win it, right? Dude, this was insane. This series was crazy. The last game of the series, Gen G's up 2-1. BLG are in a position to take them to a game 5. They have both of their Nexus turrets down. They have priority on the inhibs and a Camille and who they have in the mid lane. I think it doesn't matter who they had in the mid lane, but their mid laner had TP. TP in the top lane, TP in the mid lane. So Gen G has to, like, be so worried about the TP into their base and just, like, tapping on the Nexus, right? You would not believe the disciplined play from Gen G around this win condition from BLG. They played so safe, so calm, and so careful. Not only were they, like, aware of their own win conditions, but they were so aware of what BLG would want to do to close out that game that, like, they basically knew what BLG was going to do before they did it. They had the counter move ready at every turn. It was wild. Dude, this was like I think it was like a 55-minute game or something, where for the last, like, 15, 20 minutes, Gen G is for sure on the back foot. They're up against Bin's Camille, who, again, in this game is just a demon. But Gen G is able to do what T1 wasn't, and play around the Camille and play with such cohesion that they just shut down the Camille. They made it a non-factor in the late game. They stop a push at their Nexus and then bring it back and win the game. 4-1 BLG. Chovy gets his first international trophy.
Wow. That's
it was sick.
I mean, that's awesome. That is a great performance from Gen G. And I mean, for Chovy to get his first international is huge, but especially after, like you said, with Bin carrying the team a little bit against T1, to see him get shut down, that's pretty impressive from Gen G to top it off. I feel like China was kind of the anticipated top of the pile leading into MSI. Some questions, sure. But for Korea to take that with Gen G, that's impressive.
Dude, it was a wild series there for the lower bracket final and the upper bracket final. But yeah, that is my flavor of the week. I appreciate you giving me a little more time for that, because I knew you'd appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. But I'll go through mine pretty quickly here. My food. I had just a really solid buffalo chicken sandwich on Sunday night. We went out to dinner, Colleen, myself, and 2 of her friends, one being her friend Caitlin, who came in from Colorado for her bridal shower and everything, which was really, it was a big surprise for Colleen. I was aware of it a few weeks out, so I kept the secret, didn't give any hints or lead on anything, but it was cool being able to spend some time with her two maid of honors really that night, to go out to dinner and just get to chat, relax, and everything after a pretty busy day for Colleen in particular with the bridal shower. My music this week, with the just lately with being outside, good weather, yard work and everything, country music has just been my kind of recent go-to. So a lot of like Zach Bryan, Warren Ziders, some of those artists and everything. When I've been out doing that, it's just fun in the sun, country music. So I've been enjoying that. And my visual medium this week, I'm just going back through a new season had come out of Black Clover, one of the animes I've watched a little ways back. And I am now kind of rewatching some of the episodes, just working my way through. It's always fun. There's always bits and pieces that I remember or don't remember from those prior seasons. So I wanted to just recap for myself before watching that new season. There's a decent bit that I had kind of forgotten, so I'm enjoying that rewatch and then into the new season that came out. So yeah, nothing too crazy on my end, and that's my flavor of the week there.
Very cool. But yeah, with the conclusion of the flavor of the week, that brings us to the end of the episode. So just wanted to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for tuning in, spending your time with us. Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all. If you haven't, feel free to join in the conversation, where we always appreciate any comments, recommendations, and everything of how we can just make this entertaining for you guys as well. We love doing it, so thank you for being here, and we will see you on the next one.
Peace out, everyone.
Bye.